Well, hello and welcome to the Alpha Anywhere demo and Q&A webcast. I'm Dave McCormick, VP of Products and Services here at Alpha Software, and I'm pleased to present Dion McCormick, no relation, who is our lead solutions engineer, as well as Sarah Mitchell, in charge of our documentation department here at Alpha. As always, Dion has a short presentation to show you at the very beginning, I believe, but he's definitely here to answer your questions. So if you do have questions, go ahead and type those questions into the questions box of the GoToWebinar control panel. All right, let's get started. Hello, Dion, are you there?
Yes, sir. Off mute.
All right, let me go ahead and make you the presenter. And there you are.
Dynamite. Well, thank you so much, Dave. It's good to see you. I'm actually broadcasting live from fabulous world headquarters for Alpha Software. A little warm weather. I felt like I was in Austin for a day or two earlier this week. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, it was nice. It was
Anyway,
like almost
it's starting to
90.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's starting to cool off, so it's like back to the fall, but I really enjoy this time of year up here. So thank you for the hospitality. Amazing, amazing visit. Not only catching up on obviously our marketing and other efforts, but also spending a lot of time with the team talking about the roadmap and what's coming down the road, and saw some demos and some early release, very, very early stuff. And again, for the alpha developer community, there's so much in the hopper and so much to do across the board, specifically make it easier for you to build very nice looking, complex yet easy to build applications with feature rich capabilities, with a heavy emphasis on really good server backends for performance and other capabilities. So really the team is across the board hitting all these elements, and we have some very exciting things coming down the road and not too far away later this year. Very excited about that. So as Dave mentioned, I wanted to kind of continue a demonstration we started last week. And in fact, I'm going to have to continue it again next week also, because there's some cool stuff there. But I'll get to that in a moment. In the meantime, as Dave mentioned, we are here for your questions. Please take the time to go into your Q&A panel for the GoToWebinar control panel. Put them in there. We will do our absolute best to answer those through it. And as we've said in the past, guides at alphasoftware.com. You can send in requests and emails there, and we keep them monitoring. That helps drive what we do on these meetings, and also we try to do everything we can to support our developer community. So I wanted to continue following up on our discussion last week. So we dove into the Kanban capability, and this is part of our UX building, client-side building capability. The goal there is to make it very easy for you to take your existing skill sets and build upon those to essentially present and interact with data in a more intuitive and more powerful way than, say, traditional user interfaces. And so we really wanted to focus on, built into Alpha, and it's been around for a little while, the Kanban capability, which is really a offshoot of the list control. And that's a very important concept. The list control is a critical control because it does two things very, very well. One is that it connects to backend data sources and can manage offline data. So it kind of does double duty. First, it's like basically a data connector. The other is through the list control, you can either present it in a grid format, or you can present it in a mobile-oriented format, kind of laid out. And now you can present it in a Kanban and also a map format, which we'll cover in a future webinar. But the intent on this is the skills that you have to build a list and to download and edit data offline extend to this new way to present that data. And so the Kanban, as we mentioned last week, is a very powerful, it was created in Japan, and it was really more of a management technique, i.e. of how do you take a complex, say, shop floor and represent what's going on in a format that is easy for people to use. And you see this not only in manufacturing, but if you look at any development environment, people using Jira or using any kind of agile, Kanban is used a lot. You basically bucket your task issues, tickets, products, whatever they happen to be, into basically process steps. And those are displayed in this format here. And this shows you have your different process steps and what things are in there. And as things move from one to the other, you can then identify and see what's going on. And it's very intuitive. People picked this up within a matter of a few minutes because it's how the brain works. And very cool, it's very visual. And Latinx, and very important, we kind of mentioned this next week, is that visually, because of the way it works, you can tell where the bottlenecks. So you can actually infer information about your process by using a Kanban layout, which it's just intuitive. You can just look at it and say, yeah, where are we most busy? Well, if you look at right here, we're busy in the to do and the done area. And you can also, and I'll talk a little bit more about it, if something's in a specific, so two levels. One is you can see kind of where your loading is by process step. The other, which is more important, is that if you color code the items within it, it gives you a next level of data. And we're going to talk about that today. So for instance, we want to color code the different elements so that you provide more information, you provide more data. In this case, they've used sticky notes, and this isn't really representative of it, but you may have a situation where certain sticky notes have extra data, like something is stuck or is behind or is missing a part or whatever it happens to be. So there's sort of layers within layers that you can do within a Kanban, which is very powerful. And again, allow someone to look at a screen and instantly get a full scope and understanding of what's going on with the process. And Alpha has that built in. So we have the ability to present this data in a Kanban. It's flexible, meaning it's data driven. So if you load new data in it, it represents itself there. And you can do things like color coding and totaling and other aspects there. So I'm going to dive into two subjects today. One subject is the color coding. And then the second subject is what happens when people move around. So you'll notice in this scenario right here, I have my different situations, and I can then basically pick up a sticky note and put it into a different column. And therefore, then I can represent, say, an activity or an action or something happening. You can use the same methodology here where you can pick up and move it and drag it into different points, and you can trap that action. I'm going to show that to you in a little bit, which allows you then take secondary actions of either updating a backend database or other. And since this is built on the list data, this is actually capable of, and there's actually a great video on it that shows how you can have the list control automatically do offline management of this data and then sync her back to the database. So really cool stuff there. So I want to dive into that a little bit more, and then we're going to actually explore the list component more in future presentations, but that's where we're going to go there. So I'm going to dive into my development environment, and let's go ahead, and we ended up kind of where we're at here. So we wanted to show some different concepts of where I have different Kanban items and I can move them around. And then over on the right-hand side, I have a detail view, and I can actually, sync and edit data using this information. I can add data. We had some other elements that we were talking about last week. But I want to kind of, we kind of started going into a deep dive of how you can use the native capabilities of the list, but I want to go back and talk about some of the native capabilities for the Kanban. So I've created a simpler one, and I'm going to go ahead and bring that up and show it to you here. And you'll see that I have my Kanban list. I've actually got 4. I've actually added in my closed here because I wanted to kind of show all the elements here. I'd probably change the CSS a little bit to make it a little smaller and have a little bit tighter representation. But you'll notice something important. Check out the closed area here. Notice that it has a color bar on it. And I wanted to talk a little bit about color coding because the Kanban has built into it your ability to dynamically change the colors of items that are presented on the screen. So let's take a step back, and I'll show you I have my Kanban list. I'm going to open that up here. And currently we're using the static data. This is built-in sample data. The sample data is actually called sales pipeline for Kanban list. It's actually a pre-made one. This allows you to do it, by the way, you can either do it in JSON or CRLF, which makes it really nice. And again, this could easily have been a callback to a SQL database view or something like that to generate this data. But I'm using static data so we can send it out and people can have it available. Now, the next thing I've done is you notice I have my different fields here. And again, full list capability. I've gone to my list properties here, and I'm going to scroll down to the layout type. So the list property, as we mentioned before, has a number of different layouts. One is columnar, which is sort of a grid. That's the default out of the gate. We also have freeform, and then we've explored Kanban, and there's also custom and map. And we'll come back in a further presentation and talk a little bit more about what those are and how those work there. But once you've selected Kanban, you can now go into my settings here, and this is where we set it up. And again, I'm not going to go through detail of what we do, but we just basically say, okay, how's it laid out? What are the categories which show which are the sort of the columns that we're going to use, or the buckets? And then you can do other things like, you can modify the move icon. But there are two key things I want to focus today. One is called color JavaScript. The other is called the onMove function. So I'm going to go ahead and explore. Well, I'm going to come back and explore that in a minute. The last piece is we go to the layout, and we have our predefined layout here. And the one I picked for this case is this layout that already has the little color bar built into it. So the development team has already taken some time to go ahead and put in basically a pre-made layout. And once you select that and insert it, it inserts this here. You'll notice it has a little Kanban color capability right here. And then I've gone in and put in my other fields. And that's important. I can add as many fields as I want. So I can actually have a very dense representation. You'll notice on this Kanban, it is fairly simple. It's just like there's a topic on each one. But with Alpha, you'll notice that in this example, we're putting the name of the company and the amount of money that this potential deal, this is a sales pipeline. But there's no reason why you couldn't have 3 or 4 more other items like, what is the percentage complete? Where are we on status? Who's responsible? I mean, you can load this with more data to allow someone to quickly not only see where something is in process, but more details about it. And you do that very simply by modifying the fields that are added to your list control and then putting your fields in here. Now, I'm going to go back to list properties because I want to go into the Kanban layout settings, and I'm going to dive into color JavaScript. So built into this is the ability for you to color code things based on the data that's within each record in your list. In this case, color. So I'm going to go ahead and select that. And you'll see we have, and I'm going to expand this a little bit, we have some standard JavaScript example here. So this is in there. I added this here, and it's a very simple kind of, JavaScript. You don't have to know a lot about it. Basically, you can reference what's called the data variable. So think about it as each object in your list, each row is a set of data. And that data is dictated by what you do. Let me go back and show you real quick. If I go back to my data source, you'll notice that each data has basically 4 items. The company name, the amount, the category, and the item order are the 4 data elements. So this is, say, the data, and then this is the company part of the data, the amount, category, etc. So now I'm going to go back, and I apologize jumping around a little bit, but I'll go back to list properties, go back in here, go into the color JavaScript. Now what I can do is I can say for the row, and this is on a per row basis, look at the data, dot, and the value. Now, very important, notice this is uppercase because JSON and JavaScript is case sensitive. If I put in a lowercase c, this thing would break. It would basically not see that data. So be very cognizant. That's why I highly recommend that when you have data coming in from the back end, do everything lowercase, because then you don't have to worry about case sensitivity. But basically we can look, and this is JavaScript, so this is the equivalent function. We can say if the data category is equal to close, then return the color green. And so if you'll notice, I'm going to go ahead and click over here. I'll go back to my data source. You'll see that we have different items here, like a few of these things are closed. So now when I actually run this, it's going to do 2 things. One is I'm kind of reusing it. I'm putting it into the closed bucket here. But you'll notice that the color has changed to green. So let's say we wanted the color to be blue for proposal. I like blue. That's a nice color. So let's go ahead and go in here. Let's go to our list properties, and we do all this inside of our layout settings. And I go to my color here. So I'm going to cheat, and I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to paste it right here. And the thing I want to do is I want to make sure I'm looking at data category, uppercase, very important. And the other one was proposal, I believe it was called. And again, these are green and this is blue. and I'll just put in a // which is the equivalent for comment. So that's commenting out this. So now I have a situation where it's going to look at this data category. It says if it's completed, it's going to make it green. If it's proposal, then it's going to make it blue. And we can test this very simply by going here. So you'll notice, oh, I have some JavaScript there. You'll notice that it's now blue because it captured the fact that this is proposal versus green. And I think that has to do with my JavaScript. Let me go back and look at that. Look at those properties. And the color JavaScript, if, else, if, return. Closed is what it should have been. It's not completed. It was I put in the wrong thing. So it didn't actually say there was no completed, so it just was closed. So it should be category closed is green, category proposal is blue. I go back in here, do my work in preview. Voila, blue for my proposal items, green for my closed. And so you can do more sophisticated calculations in there. You could look at 2 or 3 items. You could say, look at the, the values of some other, because each of these rows, you're given all the data. So I have the dollar amount, whatever other things I want to add into it. So all of that can go into my JavaScript script to come up with a color and then do a coloring. And there's other things, since it's JavaScript, there's many other things you can do, manipulations, calculations, etc. Very straightforward. But now I have another level of makes my app look pretty because it was all kind of blah. And now I have something that's a little bit more colorful, a little bit more visual. So like if something's stuck, it's red, and that immediately draws the eye. So we can use human nature in terms of our representation. Now I wanted to show you one other thing there. I'm going to take questions after I do this next section. So if you have a question about this, please, I'll get to it in a few moments and take the moment to go into your Q&A panel and do it here. Now you'll notice that one of the cool things about the Kanban is not only is it a static representation, but I can highlight and move stuff around. And if I move it around here, it basically reorients it in my list. Now, there is a cool video, and Sarah, that page on the Kanban list, it has a video of how you can use the detail view so that it automatically writes that information. We can just put it into the chat window here. But I wanted to show you where you could even take a more detailed look at this. And actually, one of the cool things about this is that this week I was kind of reviewing this, and the dev teams actually added some other little features to help it make it easy for people to do this. So I'm going to go back into my design. First thing I'm going to do is go over to my JavaScript actions, and I don't have any actions here. So I'm going to create a new action, and that action is going to be called show message. And we've done something like this before. So I'm going to go in here, use my JavaScript action, which is transient, love that one. And I'll go hello world, and I have my message. I can change it all I want from there. So what I've done is created a JavaScript action, and I like to do it this way. I like to always go and define the action at the top level, UX level, and then I can call it at different places. And the reason for that is I don't have JavaScript actions buried on buttons and other places here. And if I have to maintain this, I know I can go right here, maintain it in this one place, add new features, and I know anything that triggers this will work. So it's a way of centralizing your behaviors. So I'm going to click here to see the code. If you run this little JavaScript, that's what we'll run. So I'm going to copy that to the clipboard. Now I'm going to go into my Kanban list again. I'm going to go to my list properties and go down here to layout settings. And you'll see we have a new function called onMove. Well, it's not new. It's been there for some time. So I'm going to go ahead and go into the onMove function. And I've been playing around this, so I'll show you what's going on here. And I'm going to come back and actually do a even more demo next week, but I'm going to go ahead and just paste that comment right here. So what happens here is that when onMove occurs and the person drops it somewhere, it runs any JavaScript you have here. And we'll come back and look at that a little bit more in a few moments here. So now the cool thing about this is I'll do my work in preview. Let's say I take split rail, I move it over here, watch, check this out. So anytime a move action occurs, it's running that little piece of action JavaScript. So the cool thing about that, and notice how the color changed right here, because it automatically made it qualified because it's in that row here. Um, there's some built-in behaviors that are pretty cool within the system. So the power behind that is the following, is that now when I do a modification of this list, like I do a drag and drop behavior, I'm going to go in here. I can say, make an AJAX callback and send it back to the server to say, hey, someone has modified this. Okay, server, do something. So call a web API, update a database, send out an email message or whatever. You can do things here. You can trigger action JavaScript right here. So you could actually create JavaScript and put it here. Now, the super important thing about this, and this is where why I'm going to come back and talk about it, is that when this triggers, there's some information that is given you. It's mode, from, to, etc. And it basically tells you, are you moving from like within the same column? Are you moving it from one bucket to another or one column to another? And it gives you some other information there. But what I found this week when I was putting together this demonstration, I want to say thank you to everybody for their questions, etc., was that it took a lot more to figure out, well, what item was moved, where was it moved from and to, and stuff like that. So actually in the new pre-release that's coming out tomorrow, there's going to be some new little column variables or data values that will automatically be exposed. So I can say, just give me the category it was moved to. Give me the data for the row that was moved. Like I just want to know which row was moved, what's the unique ID for it, what the data is from there. So I'm going to come back and cover that in a little more detail with a better demonstration, because I really wanted to show how easy it is for you to then manipulate, say, something on the back end, and or do a custom specific message. Like when I dropped it here, I'm showing a generic message, but maybe I want to show a message saying you have successfully moved, Big Bear Creek, whatever, from this status to this status. So we're going to show you that next week, just because I want to use the new capabilities. Otherwise, there'd be a whole bunch of JavaScript here. And again, it was very gratifying to work with the team here, because one of Alpha's key, sort of our core value is, if it takes more than a little bit to do something, then we have to figure out how to make the tool easier and do the work for you. And that's going to come from here. So the powerful thing about the onMove event, and especially with the new features here, is now you can understand, well, what changed? What did the person do? And based on that, then you can take subsequent actions. You can show messages, you can update databases, you can send SMS messages, all these kind of capabilities here using the kind of skills you already have now. So it's very easy for you to, the Alpha is doing all the hard work of managing the layout, managing the move and drag. You don't have to add any third-party products or anything else from there. And that's an important concept, because as you'll see later in the year, there's some new enhanced capabilities coming to the list control that's going to allow you to have other types of representations, and they're going to have the same behaviors. They're going to have an onMove function. They're going to have a color JavaScript function. So if you learn this now, then when the next one's out, you already have the skill sets to be able to do things along those lines. Very fun, very enjoyable. And again, I wish I could show that today, but I got to make sure I can do it before I show. Well, as you've seen in the past, I don't always do that. But in this case, I really want it to be something effective. So I'm going to take a little time, do a little homework, show you how you can then trap that. And I think you'll find it very, very fun and enjoyable from there. So that is the follow-up on the Kanban. We talked about the color JavaScript function, which allows you to color code. We talked a little bit more about the layout, so you can add more data into your representation. And we introduced you to the onMove function. And the onMove function is really that sort of, call it like a linchpin. It's a link between what happens on the device by the person and there. And guess what, guys? This is all mobile optimized capability. So I'm right now clicking and dragging, but when you say someone has an iPad or a tablet, they can actually swipe, or they can click and drag. You can tap and drag. So, for people who are building mobile solutions, this is so cool, because it's visually very compelling, and also because of all the capabilities built into the list, it could be offline when they're doing this stuff. You could trap this information, store it, do updates, and the sky's the limit. It's really powerful. It's really cool that they built this on top of the list control, because essentially you had this incredible capability, and now you're adding a representation to it so you can still leverage all those capabilities in the system. So with that, Dave, I'm going to hand it over to you if there are any questions.
There aren't a lot of questions except for one in particular, which was, hey, last week you said we could get a copy of that UX with the Kanban in it, and I said yes, and Dion was nice enough to send it to me.
Ah,
Did
good.
I
You
post
didn't
it?
throw
Did
me
I
under the
post it?
bus.
I did not. Did I? I didn't. But I posted it just now while you were talking, and I've placed it up. The download link you can find right now in the chat window. So go ahead and grab it there. And when this gets posted to YouTube, I'll make sure the link gets posted there as well. Thanks. Let's see. Oh, we do have a question that just came in. Oh, this is a great one, actually. You mentioned centralizing your functions so you won't have to repeat or rewrite them with every button.
Yes, super
How is that
important.
done?
That's great. Okay,
Yeah.
great. Okay, so I thank you so much. I'm a little bit of passionate about this concept because one of the hard there's two reasons why I really appreciate you. You kind of fell into my trap, you know. So there's two
This is a
reasons
real
for this.
question, by the way, not a staged
Yeah.
question. So,
Well, okay. So the yeah, I know it's like yes, Dave McMadden asked that question this week, so thank you very much. So there's two reasons why this is super critical. Reason number one is maintainability. Is Alpha has an incredible rich capability and there's so much in it. It's kind of easy to forget where stuff is. So like, ooh, where did I put that? You know, what that function, this or that. So the discipline of moving all of your JavaScript actions to a central location, and also things like JavaScript functions too, and I'll show you that in a moment. By centralizing, and actually this is within the last year and a half, they added this section right here, especially the JavaScript actions. It never used to be there, but it allows the discipline to have everything in a single place. So when you come back in, you go, I got to change the behavior of that button. You don't go to the button, or you may go to the button to say, what did it do? You know, what JavaScript action does it call? But then you know where to go to modify that. And what you'll find is you'll reduce the amount of time, even by a few minutes, for every time you want to make an adjustment to your system. It's all in one place. And time is money. Over time, it's there. Now, the other reason this is super important, and again, I'm on my soapbox, so bear with me, is multi-user development. As you know, Alpha, or multi-dev, we've included the new Git capability into Alpha because more and more of our clients they have multiple developers working on a solution at the same time. So the reason I say that is that if developer A is developing something and then developer B is now have to work on that, if you have maintained a certain discipline in terms of how you structure your UXs, how you write your code, how you put in, where you put your JavaScript actions, when they pick up your UX, you don't have to spend a half hour explaining where everything is. They already have a base or a frame of reference to work at. So if you're in a multi-user, and we're doing more and more of that because there's a lot of enterprises are using Alpha and it's very popular, having that discipline is super important. So the way traditionally what you do is you go in here and you say, okay, I want to add my transient message. So I double click my button, I go into add my action, I go transient, and I select my transient message here, click OK, and I go hello world, and I go there and I click OK. So now when I do my working preview, very simple, hit there, it does my message there. Now, one other thing too is, let's say I kind of reuse that action on a couple buttons. I go into that button, I now have to go, okay, add action, go through here. And I'm going, well, it's basically that I want to trigger it. Maybe it's on a different screen, maybe there's a little variant, who knows what the deal is. But instead of doing that, is the following, is if instead I go here to JavaScript actions and I add a new action. So think of this as at the UX level, the top level. So I'm going to add this new action. I'm going to call it show message UX, okay? And I'm going through the same process. I've created it here. I add my action here. I put in my transient message and I say, hello world 2, okay? Got quick saying, okay. Oh, there. So now I've done that. Now, when I go to button test number 2, I can do one of two things. Instead of now defining it here, I've got it in a central location. So if I ever need to go modify it, I just go to where I find it. And again, you want to create, that's another thing, and I'll come back to that moment, is consistent naming scheme. So now what I'm going to do is I could do one of two things. I could say the following. I could go to text mode and I can say insert code to run a JavaScript action and select that action. So now that code's not in this button. It actually says, oh, wait, I'm going to go out and talk to the UX and ask it to send there. The other thing that's really cool about this, if you have a couple UXs, you can kind of call UXs together and do some real, that's like on steroids. Now, the other thing you can do, which is really cool, is the following, is that to kind of maintain discipline, you can sit there and say add action, run action, and then pick show message. And now what we'll do is it's almost identical to the view JavaScript, but the run action just calls the UX and does it in there. Now, the reason I show you that is for two reasons. One, which is really cool, is that in here I can say pass in a reference to the object that invokes the action. And that is important. Like if you have 4 buttons and you want to know, you want to kind of basically do all the same thing for all 4 buttons, but you just want to tell it button 1 did it versus 2 or 3, and then you have a master script that does something like maybe some JavaScript or something like that. You can pass in a reference. And so the cool thing about that is when it runs, you can say, well, who called me? It tells you what control did, and then you can take, and that's kind of more of an advanced topic, but that's a nice thing here. The other discipline is that, again, when you open up here, you can go, oh, run action. And actually what you can do is I can sit here and say comment, let's see, edit comment and say show message, and put the actual text so I know what it's doing there. So either one's equivalent. It's up to you on what you want to do, which is kind of cool from there. Now, another cool feature built into this, and this is to help promote it, is that let's say you started developing your app and you're like, this is great, it's working really good. And you put your stuff in your buttons. You go, yeah, I really should have that at the top level for whatever reason, either just, cleaning up your system for maintenance purposes, or you're going to make some changes and you thought, it's better to have it centralized. Well, you'll notice over here a really powerful feature called Convert to JavaScript Action. So I click on there. I select one or more of the steps that are in here. I don't have to select them all. And then I can click OK. And I'm going to go, this is my current one. I'll go show message UX2. So what it does is notice it replaced my action built into this button with run action and pointed it to show message UX. And if I go over to JavaScript actions, there's my action there. So if you already have actions kind of embedded on all yours, just take a few moments to go through each one of those and put them at the UX level, just to kind of clean everything up and put it centrally, because I can guarantee you down the road, you're going to find it's much faster to just go, oh, I've got to change that action. I go to there, put it there. I open it up, I make the modification. Let's say I want to go in here and I want to add another step here, like go to a panel card or do something like that. Now I don't have it buried. It's all in one location. That becomes really important too when you put in, say, for instance, and I'll show you this is another reason that's important, is let's say I put in here a control bar. Where's my control bar? Okay. So I'm going to go into my control bar. I'm going to go to my items here. I'm going to add an item here, and I'll go, it's a button, run it. So I've created that button. And for people who aren't familiar with the control bar, there's some really good videos out there, demos, etc. But I've created an item there. I'm going to go to my layout here. I'm going to add a layout, and I'm going to add my line, and I'm going to add my run it button. Okay. Oh, no. Thank you, pre-release. Sorry, working on that one there. So I won't be able to show it, but I do run it here. Now what happens is when you create that, it creates a little JavaScript here. And again, I can go ahead and do action JavaScript here, but what's really cool is I can just go right here and say, insert code to run action and run my action. So now whenever I need to modify this behavior, I go here. See, notice how many layers deep I have to go. I have to, if I want, there's something up with the generator, but I go in here, I go into items, I would have to go to actions and modify it there. The beauty of that is that Since it's in one location, if I ever have to edit it, I go to one place. Now, one other thing I'd like to mention while I'm here is naming convention. And so what I would suggest you come up with is some kind of naming convention for how you name Action JavaScript, because what will happen is as your UX does more things, you're going to end up having a whole bunch of Action JavaScripts in it, because again, they're not on individual buckets or buttons or locations. They're now centralized in a central place. So what I usually do is come up with a naming convention where I like say, like it's a combination of a function and a behavior. So it's like list sync, list new, list this, or nav panel card to this. And you don't want to make them too long, otherwise they're hard to read. But if you take a few moments to think about how you want to name these things before you actually go in there, you'll find that it again goes to maintainability. And super important is when you have another person who's managing this, you hand it to them, and what will happen is they're going to go, oh, great, I know where to go get the actions. I know how they're named. It just is going to make your life a lot easier, and you're going to spend less time, coaching people from there. So that is why you want to put your JavaScript actions in here. And again, don't worry if you haven't started doing that. You can use the game of going into your current item in their button and use the convert to JavaScript action, which will then take it, centralize it for you automatically with the name you give it, and update it. So you don't have to rewrite the code. And if you have like 3 or 4 sort of steps in here, you can highlight all 4 and create a single JavaScript action out of that very readily. So it's very flexible in terms of being able to do that. Very awesome stuff. Now, I have one other comment, but before I do that, any kind of questions on that or comments or?
Yeah, one quick question, and that had to do with when you're back at the Web Projects control panel, if you could head back there for a moment.
Yes, sir.
Someone had pointed out that, oh, you have this folder here called UX controls, and they were wondering what this little section here is at the top left.
Oh, right
This
here?
drop down this folder. He says, wow, there's all this stuff. How come I don't have this stuff in my version? I don't either have it in my version.
Too many years.
A little bit about just the project management concept behind that.
Yeah, you know what? I'm going to demonstrate it this way.
Okay. Excellent.
So, yeah, I think let's do this. So I'm going to go File. Okay, so I'm going to create a new workspace. So let's say tomorrow you go, okay, I've got a brand new project. Normally I would clone my workspace. I would create a template workspace and clone it that already has a lot of stuff I already need and do. But for now, we're starting with pure as the driven snow, new workspace. So I'm going to go ahead and say webinar workspace projects. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'll just put that on my desktop. So I create OK. And I'm not going to save that one there. I will save that one there. Okay. So guess what? I now have a clean, brand new workspace. Now, the workspace is really just a collection of information, of files. It's basically, but it's something pretty cool. There's actually what's called there's the workspace level, which is the very top, but you can break your workspace into what are called projects. And let me show you an example of that. Let's say I'm creating a project for someone, and they're going to have a web dashboard and they're going to have a mobile port. Now, I could go through here and create all of my components at this top level, rename it, etc. Perfectly okay. Do that. But let's say, things are going to, over time, you just know you're going to be working on the different, there's different requirements for both the website versus the mobile. So let's go ahead and just do that. I'm going to go ahead and go in here and I'm going to create a web component and I'll just create a UX here. And this is a plain vanilla one here. It's sort of, and we'll add a text box. 1, 2, 3. So this is for my website. And I go ahead and save it, and I'll go website 1_UX. So you'll notice now I have my website 1. Now what I'm going to do is now I want to create a mobile component for my mobile site. Now I could absolutely add it here, but what I'd rather do is this. I'm going to go up here and go File, New Project. And I'm going to call this mobile. And by the way, I can create a Git repository. That's the other thing I want to talk about in a moment is how Git works with this. So I'm going to click OK. Now notice where'd my stuff go? Well, the reason it went there is that I now have 2 selectors here. And actually, the reality, I would probably right from the get-go I would probably create another project and I'll call that web dashboard or whatever. So now I've got basically my default, which is the standard one that's always created, but then I have mobile and dashboard. And so what I want to do is this one, I think I can move, copy to web dashboard. So I copied it there. Okay. So I'm going to actually delete it here. So from now on, I usually just rename my stuff here. So I've got my mobile here, so I can, and my web dashboard. And you'll notice there's my website. So now I'm going into my web mobile, and I want to go in here, and I want to go there, and I'm going to create my UX. But in this case, it's my mobile thing. So I'm going to go ahead and create like this one, which is a mobile. And so now I have my mobile interface here. And I'll call this main_UX. Great question, by the way. We appreciate it. So now you'll notice that I have my component, my web pages, whatever I need here. And then when I'm working on my dashboard, I click here and I here. So right out of the gate, it allows me to have multiple sort of works. I don't want to use the word workspace, but multiple little areas that I can focus on. Now, here's the most important reason for that. And these are very important. When I go up here to tools and I do connection strings, if I create a new one, so I'm going to create a new one here called Alpha Demo Northwinds, and it's created one for me. That is done at the workspace level. That means that all of my projects can share that connection string. So very important, connection strings are at the top level. Things like storage connection strings, SQL Server reporting name, all these are at the top level. But an important thing about it, and I'm going to go to Web Dashboard, are that profiles, your publishing profiles, are at the project level. And that's usually true. When you go publish something, if you're doing a web versus a mobile, you may not want them all in the same area. You may want them like on one folder on your server or another, or on one area, Alpha Cloud, etc. The other aspect is maybe, and this is what I see also in terms of what people do, maybe they want an internal web dashboard and an external web dashboard. And I want them separated in terms of, therefore I can, I'll never add a grid to my customer dashboard with internal data. So therefore now I can have these multiple projects and they're sort of focused on different things. They have different publishing profiles, but they all share the same connectivity to the database. And with publishing profiles, I can override them different ways, in terms of what they go there. So projects are very handy from the standpoint of allowing you to take bigger, larger projects, which may have multiple aspects to them, and break them into small pieces, both mentally how to manage it so you don't end up having 1,000 controls in here, but also setting up different publishing profiles for each one and also managing them separately. And this has become very important for another key reason, and this is super important. Before I do that, I'm going to click here on the little folder button here. And you'll notice it opens up my folder where my control is. So it's pointed to this project folder. So you'll notice that it's webinar WS project. That's the project workspace. There's a web project subfolder, and then my web project right here. And I should have probably called it something differently so it wasn't so all the time. But if I go up one, you'll see that I have a different folder for each one of my projects. And if I go up one higher, all of those, this is my root workspace. Here's where all mine are there. So now these are in separate folders. So whenever I create a new control, like in Web Dashboard, it's going to put it in there. If I create one in mobile, it's going to be there. Now, that's nice just because now you know where everything is. But more importantly, guess what? With the introduction of Git, we can now have a different repository for each of my projects, which is very common. So especially when you start developing with other people, you may be doing the web dashboard, but someone else is doing the mobile, and you really want to separate them as separate repositories. So what's nice is I can create a repository. It's going to make it inside of this project folder, and thus what will happen is at that point, it will check things in and out from that one folder. So if you're over making changes, say to the mobile side, you don't have to worry about tracking all that stuff, and you can have a different repository, which is often handy because when it all comes down to it, you usually have like a dashboard and then a a web dashboard aspect in there. It just makes it easy to manage that. Now, the reason that I use it is the following: is in my demonstration workspace, I realized I had like 1,000 things in here, and I was calling them by what they were doing. I go, oh, for when I'm talking about grids, now here are all my sample grids. When I'm doing my Google login stuff, I've got some things here. If I'm doing PDF kind of things, it's here. So I do, over the years, I've done bunch of different topics. For me, it's really easy to go, oh, I need to show someone about that UX thing like Kanban. So I would go to UX controls, and there's my Kanban item in there. Or actually, I'm sorry, it's not UX, it's actually in my list controls. And if I want to, as I showed you before, like, you know what, I've been doing a lot of Kanban stuff, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create a new project, and I'm going to call that Kanban. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my list controls. Where's my list controls? If I could spell. Where'd it go? Where's my list controls? There it is. And I'm going to take these three. I'm going to take this, and then I'm going to say, okay, move it, which is, where is it? Copy to, or to, then I can put it in my Kanban area. And now I go to my Kanban, and now I have them in there. So for me, it's more of just a managing topic levels for demonstrations. That way it's easier for me to find stuff. Plus it ends up, I don't have like 1,000 things at the same level there. And do realize when I'm in Kanban, it's A5W. All of these are in here. So if I create some scripts there, if I go to another one, these scripts will only show up in this project. So it's very handy when you start doing some more scripting and things like that to have those pieces in there. And again, they all share the same top level connection strings. But if I were to publish this, like I was doing a demo of Kanban, I could create a publishing profile on my server that will go into a specific folder. This publishing profile will only be available to this project. So when I go to another feature like grids and I publish it, I could have a completely different. It just makes things easier for you to manage and kind of compartmentalize. And then again, now with the advent of the Git integration, I can say, there. And I think what we'll do in the future, folks, is that instead of sending out, we're going to start creating Git repositories, and I'll push them to the Git repository. You can pull it down, and we'll do a session on how to do that. You don't have to install Git. You can actually go and go up on the server and pull it down from a zip file or things like that. But one of the cool things is you could create your own demo environment here and then pull things right down to it. So we'll be having fun and exploring that to help it and make it easier for people who want to pull down our samples without having to go, oh, where is it? Where is it this? You just go in here and say Git, and then say, clone an existing repository that we give you. And when you clone it, it just drops all the information down into your local drive, and you're good to go. So there's a lot of fun stuff you can do there. No, the only by the way,
Yep.
I've installed Git. You have to install Git yourself, but Sarah has excellent documentation on that process. If you click here, you don't have Git installed, it's going to give you some messages, but it only takes about 10 minutes, and you're really going to enjoy it. Okay, thanks.
Cool. Thanks very
Great
much.
question.
Couple things. One person asked where they can find the previous episodes that we have recorded of the Alpha Anywhere demo and Q&A webcast. So I have pasted that link into the chat window. You can get that there. Also, feel free
We're
if you
really
do have
working
questions.
hard. We're in negotiations, by the way, with Hulu and Netflix to be able to have it on those platforms. But
Dion, you're supposed to keep that under wraps, man. Remember, we signed a non-disclosure. I know it's gonna be the next big blockbuster thing, though, isn't it?
It is. It's gonna be.
Binge watch them over a weekend.
You will see how many subscribers quit after they see that content on there.
So that link right now is in the chat window. Also, if you haven't, I forgot to mention this before, but if you do have any questions during the week when we're not doing our webinar, go ahead and send them to guides, GUIDES, at alphasoftware.com. We can even send you out links like where to find the previous videos. Okay, so another question. Actually two, but the first one first. User asks here, do you have an example of a dashboard?
Yes, I think I have. Actually, just to let you know, and this is This actually I repurposed from our last dev conference, but if you go to Giant Killer Training and then go to free courses, and I'll come back and show you in a moment. There's a
Don't
free
let the free
course.
courses fool you,
Yeah,
folks. What happens is
and
he
it
gets you
includes
hooked, and then he jacks up the price. It's just the typical model, you know.
now.
That
Oh, where is
but
this?
you will be
Oh, no,
hooked if
this
you
is
start going
publishing.
through these. This is
Where
good
is
stuff.
where? Oh, I'll put the link in a moment.
Okay,
Let me pause here. Interesting. I haven't put it on the free courses. It is a free course, so bear with me.
great.
As okay. I want to give you that just there, but I can show you. I also have it on this machine, so I can show you that real quick. So let's go to there. Go to dashboard. It's 106. It's a fun course because it doesn't take very long, and they're really good. So there we go. Okay, chat. There you go. Okay.
All right.
And we'll go back here. So that said, I'm going
Can
to go ahead
you
and
resume your screen so we can
resume
take a
my
look at
screen
that?
there. Just didn't want, after last week.
I know,
I don't
exactly.
know if I have a
Fiasco. The
dashboard.
nuclear codes.
I'll go into charting. That's where I usually do a lot of my dashboard stuff because charting is great for dashboards. So let's see if I have this in here. And it opens up here. Okay, yeah. So here's an example of a dashboard. And let me go ahead and show you this. I hope it's still rewired. It should be wired up and we should see some dashboard stuff. So classic dashboard, I have multiple charts here. I may have so, and the cool thing about it is that it's really all it is a UX component with panel cards that are holding different data in there. And so the neat thing about that is all of your current skills are available and you can mix and match. So in this case, I'm using charts, but in the free course that you'll see, you can actually include like a report that you generate. So you can actually have a report put into a panel and it will just refresh every time you go there. And so you can see a report of data. So you're not fixed with just chart information. Now, the other thing too is we have a lot of power. So you'll notice, and I hope it's okay, but you have a panel layout and in there you have a panel card for your left chart, but my right chart is actually in a panel navigator. You'll see there's actually 3 charts here. So if I go to working preview and I go over here, check this out, pretty fun. So I have 3 charts that are in different panel cards. These right here are in what's called a panel navigator. So it obeys the swipe. And I could put buttons up here to swipe through it. I could make a carousel, etc. What's neat again is that if you publish this on like a tablet, I can actually use a swipe gesture here to swipe between charts. And it's very fluid, it's very nice, it's very pretty from there. So again, dashboards are usually a combination of data. Now, one other thing I want to show you is that there are charts. You can also include reports. But one other thing I wanted to show you, and I'll just go ahead and edit this chart here, is that in the charting functionality, we have, let's see, where is it? Where's that? There it is. This is another example of a chart, which is really powerful. And we see this a lot in our manufacturing. It's sort of like, what is our capacity limitations? What are we at, et cetera. So you can put a series of 5 or 10 of these on a UX, have each one of these tied to a piece of data. And what's really cool about that is then it would represent, say, like, what's my, speed, or am I at 100% efficiency, or am I overloaded, et cetera. Now, another aspect of this, which is really powerful, is that you'll notice that once I go in here and hit preview, basically what it does is it runs, grabs the data, and updates these charts. And by the way, you notice I'm using the little, we've covered this before, but an indicator to show that there's actually a couple different cards in this. And you can make that more obvious if you so choose. But let's say I want to update these charts on an ongoing basis. Well, what's really cool here is I'm going to go and I'm going to use I'm going to go into my action JavaScript, and I'm going to say refresh chart. I'm going to click OK. Go into my refresh chart. I'm going to add a new action. And I'm going to go to my JavaScript chart area. So notice I have JavaScript chart actions. I can select an action here, which is refresh data in the chart. And I can go in and say, oh, you know what? Let's refresh all three. So now I have a new action called refresh charts. So now what I can do is go right here. I'm going to add a button. Notice I did the action before I did the button because I don't know how I'm going to use that action. So I'm going to go refresh. So I click refresh, open that button, and then I can either go here to view job. I'm sorry, go to text mode and say insert code to run it, or a better discipline is go here, run action, and select refresh chart. So now I'm going to trigger that central. If I go into work and preview, I can click refresh, and it's instantaneous because these are client side, so you don't see them flash or anything like that, but the data is refreshing the moment I hit it. Oh, it did work. Cool. Okay, so I want to show that again, so it's cool. So people see that. Okay, so I'm going to click refresh. Isn't that cool? No re-rendering of the screen. It just happens.
Awesome.
And you just see the new data. And especially if you have those little vertical bar charts. Let's say you're refreshing. Now, let's talk about that. Let's say you want this chart to refresh automatically for the person. Well, there's two ways to handle it. The more sophisticated way is called WebSockets, where the server can say, hey, we have new data updates, call it out, much bigger than today. But you can do the following, which is something that you have to be judicious. You don't want to overload your server. But I'm going to go here to my UX properties, and I'm going to search for refresh. And you'll notice, no, it's not refresh. Where is it? It's all the way. Where is that? That's all the. Where is that? There's a way to have the UX file. Oh, timed. It's called timed or something like that. Yeah. Okay. It's called has on timer event. So if you scroll down, it's called has on timer event. So you can say, yes, I have an on timer event. How often do you want it to happen? Every 60 seconds. So I'm going to make this 10 seconds. Then what I can do is once I've done this, I've turned it on. Now, it won't actually do anything. It's going to say, oh, run, because what you need to do now, and this is very important, is after you set the on timer event, you go to your client side events and look for on timer right there. So step one is enable on timing in the properties. Step two is now you go to the on timer event and you put in your JavaScript here. Well, guess what? Because I was smart and set up my JavaScript action at the UX level, all I have to do is insert code to run a JavaScript action, say go. So now let's go into working preview. I'm going to go over here, and we need the Jeopardy song there, Dun, 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 dun. I should have made it 5 seconds. There it is.
Oh, there we go.
There we go. Is that cool? So what can happen is every 10 seconds this will update, and I don't think it will update. I think it did a refresh. Oh yeah, well, I think that's generating random data is what that's doing. So you got to be a little careful on this. One is that it's really powerful, but every time you do that, it's potentially making a call back to the server to ask the server to get like a SQL query and get some data. So if I built this chart off SQL data, then I've got that issue there. So you got to be very judicious there. The other aspect around this, which is very important, is that you got to be careful you don't overload the person with things flashing all over the place. You want to flash and update things that are important. Other things you can put a refresh and they can go in and click refresh and do it themselves. So you can pick and choose there. One other thing that's cool about JavaScript charts is when you build them, and let's see if I did it here. Let's go to properties, and I cover this in there. So these are data binds. Let's go bind. Let's see, data series. There it is. Yeah, I didn't do it. But what you can do is you can tie your charts to data series. And what's cool about data series is you can say publish data series data there. So let's say you have a chart that's going against a database. You can set it up all that way, and then with the data series, and then when the chart, what we'll do is when the UX loads, it calls up to the database, grabs that data and stores it locally. So if the person happens to be offline, the chart will still render. And that's all kind of covered in the training and the other pieces there. So that's a
Very
quick
cool.
introduction to dashboards. They're really fun. You can do all this with reports there, other kinds of controls. You can bring in third-party controls. I've seen people do this with Google Charts or Google, I guess, Charts. And so, but nice thing is Alpha's built in all this charting capabilities, so you don't have to sit there and figure out how to do it. We've already rewired things, allow you to hook it to data series, etc.
Wow, great answer. Not just an answer, but also a free course to the answer to that
I
question.
know, and I
So,
nailed it just
wow.
on time, and we're
Twice
out,
nailed it, and we did just at
and we're
2.5.
done.
So, hey, Dion, thanks very much for
Thank
presenting.
you.
Thanks everyone here for attending, especially those who ask questions. Help keep these sessions lively. If you do have further questions, go ahead and send an email to guides, GUIDES, @alphasoftware.com. Thanks again for attending. We hope to see you next week. Take care and goodbye.